The Meanest Doll in the World by Anne Martin and Laura Goodwin. Chapter 9 Chaos. Mean Mimi, resplendent in her princess garb, ran into the room alongside the Sandra doll. "Get that!" she cried, pointing to a pile of toys. The Sandra doll kicked the toys, sending them crashing to the floor. "And that!" Mean Mimi cried. This time, the Sandra doll kicked through one of Beth's barricades. "What if she kicks the hut?" asked Annabel in a quivering voice. Melody looked at the walls of the hut in alarm. "Evacuate!" she shouted. "Everybody out!" "Out there?" exclaimed Annabel, pointing to BJ's room. "We can scatter. We'll be harder to catch." "Scatter, scatter, everybody scatter," sang the head cutout. "Except for us, of course," she added with a glance at the cutouts, joining hands. As Annabel fled through the door, she wished again that Auntie Sarah were already manufacturing her spider silk ladders so that Annabel could climb up to the safety of the ceiling. "Keep the Sandra doll away from the hut," Yvonne cried suddenly. "If she wrecks it, we won't be able to rebuild it." "Yo, Mimi, over here!" Annabel, nearly frozen with terror, saw Tiffany run through BJ's room, dodging booby traps and piles of toys. She reached a far corner, stuck her thumbs in her ears, and wiggled her fingers at Mean Mimi. "Na na 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 na," she called, which was something Annabel had always wanted to do. Mean Mimi turned and saw Tiffany. "Go get her," she ordered the Sandra doll. The Sandra doll hesitated. She looked pleadingly at Mimi. "Oh, all right," said Mimi, sounding highly annoyed. She grabbed a large blanket that had been lying nearby and heaved it toward the Sandra doll. The Sandra doll, big but clumsy as a toddler, tried to catch the blanket, missed it, lurched forward a few steps, then bent to pick it up. She draped it around her neck and stuck her thumb in her mouth. Then she lumbered across the room in the direction of Tiffany. Mean Mimi turned her attention to Sleeping Billy, who was sitting on the floor amid BJ's toys, picking them up, dropping them, patting them, putting them in his mouth. "On your feet, you big baby," she ordered him, and she grabbed his hand and tugged at him. "You're supposed to be helping us," said Mean Mimi, puffing. "Catch somebody! Break something! Get going!" Sleeping Billy tottered after the Sandra doll. Annabel looked around BJ's room and was just thinking that the attack wasn't as bad as she thought it would be. Certainly, it was not moving along very quickly when she heard a great clinking and clanking from the hallway and turned around to see two things happen at once. First, a barrage of metal cars and trucks began sailing off the end of the racetrack and soaring through BJ's room. And then, with the missiles still flying, a man dressed in a suit that appeared to be composed almost entirely of gadgets, an important-looking helmet on his head, strode grimly through the doorway. He was carrying what looked like to Annabel like a laser stick in one hand. Nearly as frightening were the blinking lights on his helmet. Annabel couldn't help herself. She let out a scream. And for a few seconds, everyone in BJ's room stopped what she or he was doing. And in those quiet seconds, Annabel realized that the fighting man's helmet wasn't just blinking, it was making all sorts of noises, bleeping and flapping and pinging and buzzing and zapping. Annabel held her eyes, and then suddenly, chaos. Annabel opened her eyes in time to see the missiles begin to land in the room. They knocked toys off BJ's bookshelves. They smashed into the drawings, tacked onto the walls, and one ripped the corner of a baseball poster. Another put a nick in the headboard of the bed. One slammed into Yvonne and knocked her on her feet. One popped the top off the lizard's cage. And one soared towards Tiffany. "Duck!" shrieked Annabel, and Tiffany dropped to the ground as a fire truck shot towards her head. Moments later, a Jeep landed in the middle of the room and skidded into Mean Mimi, causing her to fall backwards and land on her bottom. Annabelle would have laughed if she hadn't been so frightened. Calm, calm, everybody calm, Annabelle heard the cutout sing. Oh, shut up, said Mean Mimi. Jealous, she's jealous, always jealous, was the reply. Sandra, Sleeping Billy, Techno Man, cried Mean Mimi. Doesn't anybody remember what we talked about? Sleeping Billy made his way across the room to the Sandra doll, then who took his hand. That's right, teamwork, said Mean Mimi. The Sandra doll and Sleeping Billy turned woodenly and began marching through the room, not bothering to step over anything in their way. They trod on plastic animals and kicked through the rest of the barricades. They nearly missed trampling Beth, who was helping Yvonne to her feet. And then Annabelle saw that they were headed for the Lego hut. Tiffany, called Annabelle. Help! Tiffany started across the room, but was stopped by Techno Man. He stepped in front of her, his feet planted solidly apart, holding his weapons in both hands. Not one more step, missy, or I'll blast you, he said. Tiffany looked at the beeping helmet. She looked at the laser. Then she looked at Techno Man in his eyes and said, Okay, go ahead. There are so many advantages of being plastic, thought Annabelle. Techno Man glanced at Mean Mimi, who glared at him until he said, Oh, as if he had just remembered something, and he turned and ran out of the room. As soon as he was gone, Tiffany continued in the direction of the Lego hut. She moved much faster than the Sandra doll and Sleeping Billy, and she reached it several seconds before they did. Then she stood by the doorway to the hut, put her hands on her hips, and sang, Ta-da-da-da-boom day, I lost my pets today, I found them yesterday, ta-da-da-da-boom today. Annabelle's mouth dropped open, and so did Mean Mimi's. But the PJ Party pals, the Troll Twins, and even the cutouts began to laugh. And then so did the Sandra doll and Sleeping Billy. Shut up! Mean Mimi said furiously, but only the Sandra doll obeyed her. Mean Mimi ran from the room. As soon as she was out of sight, the Sandra doll began to laugh again. But all the laughter stopped abruptly when there was another commotion in the hallway outside BJ's room. And then something happened so fast that later Annabelle had trouble describing it, even though she had seen it with her own eyes. From the hallway, Annabelle heard the rumble of a motor, and then the honking of a toy car. And then a large pink VW Beetle zoomed into the room with Techno Man in the driver's seat, his helmet beeping and ringing. Behind the car ran Mean Mimi, holding a complicated-looking box, with which Annabelle realized she was controlling the car. The car bumped over everything in its path. It crunched over toys and markers and papers. It knocked Sleeping Billy to the ground, and he fell asleep in an instant. Just when Annabelle was sure Mean Mimi was going to crash the car into the hut, Techno Man leaped out of the driver's seat and snatched up Penny. Gotcha, he cried. Help! Yelped Penny. After them, shouted Melody. And she and Tiffany and Yvonne and Beth and Waterfall and even Annabelle began to chase the car. They might actually have caught up with it, Annabelle thought. But in the confusion, Mimi steered the car into the lizard's cage. Penny escaped and Technoman lost his helmet. As the helmet tumbled to the ground, Annabelle gasped. The beeping and pinging stopped, and Annabelle saw that Technoman wasn't an action figure after all. He was an ordinary boy doll wearing a fancy costume. His weapon was a toy. His helmet did nothing but make noise. Look, Tiffany, exclaimed Annabelle. He's just... I know, replied Tiffany. That's why I told him to go ahead and blast me. I didn't think he could do it. Troops! Shouted Mean Mimi. Assemble! Annabelle looked at Sleeping Billy, napping on the floor, at Technoman, patting at his crew cut, at the Sandra doll, who was still giggling over Tiffany's song. I said assemble! Mimi hurried across the room to the Sandra doll and snatched away her blanket. Come here! The Sandra doll whimpered, but turned to follow Mean Mimi. And Annabelle, her eyes large, suddenly whispered to Tiffany, who repeated it to Penny, Yvonne, and Beth. In a flash, Tiffany and the PJ Party pals had ambushed Mimi and stolen the Sandra doll's blanket. Now try to tell her what to do, Melody said to Mimi. Order that Sandra doll around. Get over here, Sandra, Mean Mimi said weakly. But the Sandra doll only gazed longingly at her blanket, which the PJ Party pals were holding. She wants her blankie, Annabelle said, surprising herself. She won't do anything you tell her unless you hand her the blanket. Will she, Mimi? You can't control her. Oh, no, you can't. Oh, no, you can't. Oh, no, you can't control her, sang the cutouts. All you have to do, Annabelle said to the PJ Party pals, the troll twins and the cutouts, is let the Sandra doll have her blankie and be nice to her. She'll listen to you. Well, Techno Man, Mean Mimi began to sputter. You can't control him either, said Annabelle. You never could. Techno Man likes to show off, but he's not really an action figure, so nobody has any reason to be afraid of him. Get back here, Techno Man, Mean Mimi shouted. A Techno Man was slinking through the door into the hallway. He gave a small wave over his shoulder and disappeared. Sleeping Billy will always do whatever I tell him, said Mimi. Everyone looked across the room to where Sleeping Billy lay in a bed of toys. The Sandra doll was sitting next to him, trying to cover him with a blanket. I have a feeling, said Annabelle quietly, that Sleeping Billy just wants to be with the Sandra doll. Nice army, said Waterfall to Mimi. Mean Mimi began to flounce out of the room. She was only halfway across it when Yvonne shrieked, Oh no! And the cutouts sang, Beware the lizard. That was when Annabelle saw BJ's lizard slither over the top of his cage and disappear into the chaos of the room. Screaming and hollering, Annabelle, Tiffany, and their new friends ran for the Lego hut, and me and Mimi fled into the hallway, leaving the Sandra doll and Sleeping Billy behind. Annabelle watched the Sandra doll tug at Sleeping Billy and help him out of the room. All was quiet at last, except for the sound of many crickets chirping.